Okay, so I've been seeing a lot of videos talking about Macross 7, and all of them are either non-spoiler or the comment section is full of reasons not to watch it. So this is my review slash why you should watch Macross 7, and I made a list of episodes you should watch. Of course, you should watch the whole series because it's one story, right? But I wanted to pick up specific episodes where this shows you what's good about Macross 7. Like, what does it bring to the table? What are good episodes? What are episodes that I personally like? Yes, I'm going to cover the encore episodes, I'm going to cover the movie, and I'm going to cover Dynamite 7. This is going to be a long video. Now, I'm going to do this in my way, because I'm not going to do like everybody else, just say, oh, give you a background of the story and all this other stuff. People have already done that. That's not what I'm here to do. What I'm here to do is give you episodes that explain the greatness of Macross 7, why it's good, and no, it's not every episode, okay? I cut out a lot of episodes. I put more than I expected to, but I cut out a lot because there are a lot of filler episodes that really don't mean very much. And they, like, of course, because you need to watch the whole series to get the whole story, like, you should watch from episode 1 all the way to 49 plus the other episodes, blah blah blah. But I wanted to pick up specific episodes, and I wanted to give at least one reason why those episodes are ones that I think are important to watch, either for some deep meaning or just because I think they're really good episodes. Although I made sure that in most of my episode selection choices that I made sure I had at least one legitimate reason, not just because, oh, I think it's a great episode or something, but I tried to make sure that I had at least one legitimate reason why you should watch it. Now, I wrote all my notes in Japanese as I was watching it, as I was going along, as I was watching in Japanese. So my notes are in Japanese, but you can see the numbers there. I put some pictures here so you can kind of get an idea of like some key points and key characters that come up at certain points. And so so you can follow the numbers if you want to. And this is I'm making this video because I am tired of people looking at Macross 7 in such a, what's the best word for it? I want to say a superficial, no, that's the right word, superficial, in a very superficial way, because there is so much lore in Macross 7 that directly relates to everything else in the Macross universe. And so, and even 2. So, and not just the songs. There's some things here that kind of, because they kind of have correlations to Macross 2, even though Macross 2 is 45 years after the events of Macross 7. But I want people to understand the importance of Macross 7 to the universe, because no one else will talk about it. And yes, this is going to have spoilers. So, and just a quick outline, I'm going to talk about the episodes, why those episodes are important. Then I'm going to talk about some points that Macross 7 is bashed on, and I'm going to put some counterpoints to that. And then I'm going to talk about some, related lore stuff at the end. So that the lore stuff, I wanted to kind of put into one little place so that we could so it's like a discussion area, to bring up various, issues, or what's the word, or like theory crafting, you could say. There's some things that kind of like are pretty straightforward that Macross 7 actually makes, is a direct connection to later stuff, but then there's some stuff that's a lot of things you need to question, and so and there's no direct answer to any of it, so it's just like some discussion. I'll just leave it at that. So starting from the beginning, the first episode, I can't remember, the first episode is episode 11, which is Minmei video. Now, why is this episode important? This episode is important is because Mylene finally understands why Basara didn't want to be involved in the making of that Minmei story movie, because it ended up being just, a propaganda video from, like, using Max and Miria to get, the people of Macross City, of City 7, to not worry about the vampires, aka the Proto-Devlin, right? And it's one of the deeper episodes of the show. It's one of my favorite episodes of the show, because of this reason. It's not some superficial, like, let's just sing and blah, 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 blah. It's, it's looking at, the fact that the whole story behind Mime is basically being used as propaganda, and as time goes along, the story is just, like, it takes different forms over time, and, people forget about it in the future. Just like, Macross 2, because 45 years later, like, people basically just said, oh, like, when Mash explains the Macross to Ishtar, they basically have forgotten completely about Mime. Oh, just the ship fell down and the love song ended a war, kind of thing. And that's basically it. That's basically how far separated everything becomes. So it's a direct relation to that, too. But I think this episode, in and of itself, is a very deep episode, and I really think that it's one of the must-watch episodes of all of Macross 7. Now, the next one is the Tatakao Onna Shicho Media. So, I forgot what episode number this was. I didn't write it down when I was doing my notes. But this is the episode where Miria gets in her VF-1J and starts shooting at the Proto-Devlin fighters. She ends up getting shot in the leg. But this episode is one of the few that really puts a spotlight on Miria. And being that Max and Miria are kind of, they're in the front of the story, but they're not the main characters. So when there's a spotlight put on them, like in this particular episode, I think that it's a worth watch, especially because Miria is actually, using a 1J against, modified VF-14 vampires that are, far superior than it, and she's kicking their butts. So, typical, like, it's a good chance to show off Miria's skills, right? And being a Max and Miria fanboy, this episode is really good. Now, the next two is a two-parter, and it involves the first episode that brings in Shibiru, which are episodes 16 and 17. And why are these important? So Fujika, who is he takes over for Docker after Docker gets, his spiritual sucked out in Diamond Force with Kindu and Gamrin. Now, this episode, this is a two-parter, and this is very important that you watch both, because it brings to conclusion the whole situation with Fujika. So In 16, he dies. Well, maybe I should backtrack a little bit. He creates this little like song house thing that when you open it, plays a little song for his son and his wife. And he tells Gamelin like, well, my son still doesn't remember my face yet, even though he's 2 years old, and blah 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 blah. And then in the battle near the end of the episode, he gets killed. Gamelin takes the because Fujika had it in his Valkyrie when he was shot. That it was still left over, so Gamelin takes it back. Now, that's the main part. Then the second part is when Gamelin finally goes to give that to his Fujika's widow and son. He walks up and he sees that the actual father of the boy is a completely different man, meaning the wife was cheating on Fujika the entire time. So this is one of those, this is a rarity in Macross where they have this kind of, like kind of sad ending story arc kind of thing. This is a very rare like 2-part story that in all of Macross that I think really shines a light on some of the original ideas that were used in the series. And this is definitely that, thing. That's definitely the one of the best 2-parters of any of this, okay? Now, going from that, we go to the main part of what becomes the middle area of all of the series, with Shibiru awakening, and then the Macross 5 battle group finding a new planet that is very Earth-like, and they invite Macross 7 to go there. And it's basically from episode 18 to 26 is the main, like the core points of this. Of course, later there's some other stuff that's kind of important, but it evolves a lot around Shibiru. So the first thing is that Shibiru, well, just for one of those homages, one of the Zentradi in episode 19, they drew him like Gald from Macross Plus. So look at that. He jumps out of his truck because some guy is just, waiting, and if you look very carefully, it looks exactly like Gald. They drew him exactly like that. That was on purpose, absolutely. So just keep an eye out for that one. That's just a little Easter egg thing. Episode 19, other than that, isn't really that important. But the key point is episode 20, where Shibiru becomes extremely interested in Basara and Anima Spiritua. And why is this important? Is because Shibiru is the only Proto-Devlin, until later Gigito, right? But is the only Proto-Devlin to actually want to listen to Basara's music. And he's able to communicate through music to her. This is the key point of the entire series, is how important it was that Basara's music and his songs were communicated and to the Proto-Devlin. Shibiru is the catalyst for all this. And this is where episode 20 is vital to the rest of the entire show. It's one of the most important episodes to the rest of the show. Then, in episode 21, the first time they see Exodore says Proto-Devlin is when that happens. And then episode 23 is where they officially create Sound Force, and with Basara, Miren, and Rei, and Bihina. And also it's the first mention of or the first visuals of planet Raksu, which is a planet where they get stuck on for a while because the Proto-Devlins surround it and stuff. And then after then episode 26 is the first time that Girapinichi actually makes herself known to all of the all to Macross 7 people. So that's a key point. Now, episode 27. So we have Sound Force at 23, and only 4 episodes later, we're getting the because Barugo comes in as the next Proto Devlin baddie, and Basara's songs actually kill his little spiritual sucking monsters, and that causes Basara to get really upset because he doesn't want to use music for violence, right? But this is the first time that songs are used as a weapon. This is where the hypothesis that is put forth by Belger, Stone, and Macross Delta is brought up. Okay? So, keep that in mind. This is where, this is connecting to Delta, okay? And then in episode 28, they create the sound boosters, which then become weapons, right? With, like, official weapons, right? For using songs as a weapon, which goes back to Belger Stone's thing. Then, one of my favorite episodes is episode 29. It's called Papa Mama Aif Tatabi. So it's focusing on Max and Miria's love for each other. And yes, Miria puts her head on Max's shoulder, and she kind of relaxes, and she's happy with him and all this other stuff. And so that's the key point in the episode, and it's one of the few where Mylene actually is like, I want them to stop fighting with each other. So she sets up a little plot to get them to stop arguing with each other and to be happy with each other. But the things that she does in that episode are extremely hilarious. Like she dresses really provocatively, shall we say, and she's going around calling Max Papa, Papa, Papa. I mean, Papa's not a big deal, but usually when it's a young girl talking to an older guy, because he's 50 in Macross 7, right? They think that she's some gold digger or something. So, all of the bridge crew girls, Miho and Sally and Kim and all them, all get together, and they're all kind of gossiping, and then Extor has to correct them. Oh, that's Max's daughter. Oh! It's really good. That episode's really funny, but it also is a lot of the stuff between Max and Miria is really important, because it's part of why Mylene is the way she is, because they just fight all the time. And then we have episode 32 is the first appearance of the Jamming Birds, which is known as Operation M. So keep that in mind. Where the idea of Lady M came from, there's Operation M, which came out of Macross 7. And then in episode 34 is one of the very few episodes where Behita actually talks. And that's interesting. Then episode 35, I think, it's a focus on Gubaba a little bit. And this is the first instance where songs have a direct impact on animals. Why is this important? The space whale, the galaxy whale from Dynamite 7, and the Bajira, okay? So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I want to point those out. So 36, I don't let's see. Episode 36, I don't recommend by itself, but you have to watch it in order to understand episode 37, and episode 37 is probably the most important episode of Macross 7, period, because it's about the history of protoculture. That's an entire explanation of the history of protoculture, where the Zentradi came from, where the Ebiru came from, which is the Proto-Devlin, and that's this is probably when it comes to let's say protoculture lore stuff in other series. Let's see. In Frontier was which one was it? I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. Which episode it was? It was one of the later episodes, like 23 or 24, somewhere around there. Where they talk about how the Bajira, how the protoculture actually, were inspired and in awe of the Bajira when they first encountered them. So it's kind of on that level where this episode is all the most important protoculture lore. And of course there's a little bit that comes out after that, like about where how many proto-devlin are left over and all this other stuff, but that it all goes back to this episode. But in order to understand episode 37, you have to watch 36. So I don't necessarily recommend 36, but 36 is required viewing for 37, and 37 is the most important episode of Macross 7. And then you have 38, which is the end of Planet Noxib, and you see what Gigiru actually really looks like. And then episode 39, the important thing that Max says in 39 is that that the protoculture created the proto-devlin in order to defeat the Zentradi and Meltrani, because the war between those two were getting out of control. Well, there was some other life form that actually got into their bodies and took over their bodies, and then they had to, put them away. Now, this is where episode 9 is where they explain that the proto-devlin are something that the protoculture created to stop the Zentradi, but they were, their spirits were taken over by this other life energy or being from somewhere else, right? And then episode 40, I think the only real thing is that Basara makes a point that the proto-devlin have a heart, which is true, because if you think that the protoculture made them, songs were able to communicate to Zentradi and give them back culture, well, you would think by default that that's the same thing that would happen with the proto-devlin, because they originally were created by the protoculture, and songs work on the Zentradi, so they would work on the proto-devlin naturally. So that's just like one of those, main things. Then episode 41 is where you hear them talk about this is the episode of Billy, Mylene's fan, and how they let the plants and things listen to music. And that's a direct connection to the movie of Macross 7. Now, the Macross 7 movie, which I think is best after probably 43, but it cannot be after Operation Stargazer. So I think that's why they put it, the particular download I used put the movie version between 41 and 42. Now, the only real important thing is you get to see Emilia, so the 5th daughter of Maximiria, and it's also where the first ever picture of the entire genus family is there. Without Moarame, right? Because Macross M3 came out in 99 or something like that. So it was after Macross 7. Finished its production, everything, right? But for the main 7 daughters with mom and dad, that family picture is the first place you ever see that. Then there's a picture of Emilia with one of her older sisters, but because they're twins, Therese and Muse, we don't know which one is the one with Emilia in that picture, because they look exactly the same. But that's also a key point is that Emilia is very close with them. There's also a picture of Emilia in the car with Max while he's driving. But so that's about all from that. Episode 43, I think, is another one. It's one of the more important episodes. It's not on the level of, let's say, 37, but there's 2 points of episode 43 that are important. One, Max and Miria still show love to each other. Miria, before they go through Operation Stargazer, she actually is with Max in a room, just the two of them, and she actually holds his hand. So it's telling you that Miria doesn't actually hate Max at all. She still loves him. They're always fighting because of the situation between the military and how she's the mayor of City 7 and stuff like that. But it's another episode where you get to see where, they still do love each other. And this is something that a lot of people have complained about, so I'll go into that a little bit later. And also, an important point, the Macross 7 battle group has been basically thrown away by the Earth government. And this is a key point because the Frontier battle group, the Galaxy battle group, and all the other groups out there, they've been thrown away. The Earth wants nothing to do with them at this point. So that's why you get stuff like SMS in Macross Frontier or Chaos in Macross Delta. Because the Earth government is like, you guys deal with your own problems. We're going to stay here on Earth and we'll lock ourselves away, basically. So this is the first evidence that Macross 2's universe is completely canon within the series that come after it. Because this is vital to, because Earth is cut off from the rest of everywhere and they don't want anything to do with anybody, the people on Earth don't really pay attention to what's going on in space, right? So that's where it kind of gets in there. And then episode 44 is the key turning point battle of Macross 7, which is Operation Stargazer, so you gotta watch that. 45 is the truth about what the spiritual farm is. And then 46 is not that important. It's like Gamelin's revolt or something like that. It's not that important of an episode. But 47 and 49 are the final 3 episodes, and they're all one set because it's all leading to the end of the series. So you have to watch all 3 of them for that point. So that's the TV series. Now, for the encore episodes, if you want to watch them, you can. But you don't have to. I like 2 particular episodes, On Stage and the Saikyou no Onna Kantei, which is, I'll explain that in a second. So, because I like Miho as the operator character, and she's in Macross VFX 2, meaning she got transferred from the Macross 7 battle group to another battle group, and now she's, an operator away from Macross 7. So, and I believe that VFX 2 is like 2050. So, so she's been, after the events of Dynamite 7, she's transferred. Which is kind of sad. She should have stayed with Macross 7. But, anyway. Her and Sally, the stuff with her, with the 2 of them, are pretty funny. And then the episode, Which Do You Like? I like it because Miria is kind of the main. But also, she's trying to force Mylene to marry Basara and not Gamelin. And this gives you hints to, why the Genus girls, all the daughters, have terrible luck with men. Because we don't know what happened with Miranda. We just know that she gave birth to Mirage. So we know nothing that if Miranda's still married or whatever, right? So we can't say anything about her. Emilia, I'll talk about her a little bit later. but it gives all these hints to, like, Miria is really hands-on in her daughter's relationships. If she's so involved with Mylene, she definitely had to be involved with everybody else's. So maybe this is more theory crafting. Like, probably this is why, the girls, the daughters, have terrible luck with men. Now, with the episode with Chloe and the separate Meltrandi battle group, there's proof that Max and Miria are still love each other very much. Other than that, it's not that big of a deal. But it does show that through Mylene singing "Do You Remember Love," there's a different effect than what Minmay had in the first war against the Zentradi. It also shows that with Basara, because he's a guy and he's a rock star kind of thing, that the girls, the Meltrandi battle group, kind of fall in love with him or something. So, it's kind of got like that groupie vibe to it. But it gives some, kind of little things here and there about how songs have different effects based on who sings it, kind of thing. So, now, I'm going to move on to the points where typically people bash the series. I had 3 points, and then I'm going to go on to the bottom part here, which is the theory crafting stuff. So, first, Basara is only interested in music. That's not true. He just, you have to look at him from the perspective of different characters. I'll go that more into here, but he's not only interested in only music. He cares about how people feel about his music, right? But there's more to it, and I'll go that into the theory crafting section. The Proto-Devlin themselves, part 2. People talk about them being space vampires. No. They weren't originally that. They were designed, as I mentioned before, that they were designed by Protoculture to defeat the Zentradi and the Meltrandi. The problem is that they got, taken over by these other beings, and which you could see when Shibiru, in one of the episodes where she goes inside, Rex and inside Akiko, and it's kind of causing trouble. And also in the episode episode 46, where Gomlin gets taken over by Gabiru. That's what the Proto-Devlin can do, is they can merge themselves and take over bodies. So, they're not just vampires, and it's not about vampire anything, right? And the fact that they are the reason why the Protoculture were wiped out. The war between the Zentradi and the Meltrandi wiped out about 85% of the of the Protoculture, whereas there was a spiritual black hole, which happens in episode 48, 49 at the end of the TV series. But Basara is able to break through it and create something new. The Proto-Devil are not just vampires, and they're far deeper than just, they suck the energy out of people. Okay, that's how they have to survive. But that's not, the key. That doesn't make them necessarily vampires either. So, and then I've heard somebody in another video, in another Macross 7 review, who didn't spoil anything, talk about how every time songs beat the Proto-Devlin back. And that's not true. It wasn't until Shibiru actually realized that Basara's anima spiritua that the songs actually had an effect on the Proto-Devlin, okay? So, the idea that every time Basara goes out there and sings, he's able to, push the enemies away. It's not true. The entire until Shibiru even comes around, and when Shibiru is not even involved, the only time the songs really work is on Gurabiru, the big one that's always with Gabiru, and and a couple of the later ones. I forget the second one. One of them, I think Gomora. I forget, but they. That's not true that Basara beats him every time with a song. He goes out there and sings, but nothing actually happens until later. And then later, the song is used to try to break the mind control of the Macross 5 pilots so they can come back and, join with the Macross 7 battle group. So, now, going into the theory crafting part. So here. So, we have to remember that Anima Spiritua was created by the Protoculture to stop the Proto-Devlin and to lock them away, right? And they locked them on that ice world, the Barota, the fourth planet of the Barota system. So where did Basara come from? We only get a little bit of information about Basara. Is that he would, as a child, he would walk over to this mountain and sing at the mountain, and he wanted to move the mountain. Now let's compare that to Mikumo. Because Mikumo is a clone of a Protoculture Hoshinu Taite from Windermere, right? But the only thing she knows is songs. That's similar to Basara in a way, isn't it? I mean, Basara does have, like other human aspects. Mikumo is very, very dry in the TV series and in the first movie. The second movie, she's different. I like Mikumo much better in the second movie, but I won't go into that. But the point being is that, being that we don't know the background of Basara, we just know he lived on this one planet, and he would go out there and sing at the mountain all the time. How is this connected to Anima Spiritua that were created by the Protoculture to stop the Proto-Devlin? That's one of the questions I have. What's the relationship between there? Which, we don't have any answer for that. But that's one question. Now, they use a song, the Jamming Birds song that they use is Barikiri ni Notte, which is a Macross 2 song. Now, it's used as a propaganda song in Macross 2 for the Moon Festival in episode 3. Now, how do we know this is a complete propaganda song? Is that because it's used by the military for Operation M with the Jamming Birds. They used that song specifically. So this is putting a connection between 7 and 2, where they write the song for Jamming Birds. It fails horribly, but the Earth government decides, we'll just keep using it because it's a good song to get people to join the military and stuff like that. So they continue to use it as propaganda up until Macross 2. So that's a connection to Macross 2. Then, as I mentioned before, our Mikumo and Basara look similar. And then the VF-17. This is a straight out fact, is that the VF-17 in Macross 7 becomes the VF-171 as basically a cost cut version of the VF-17. The VF-17 has an active stealth system and all this kind of amazing stuff, whereas the 171 doesn't have these things to cut costs. But due to Macross 7 and how useful the VF-17 was in different situations, and Gamelin being a really good pilot, they decided to turn it into their next generation mass production type Valkyrie. So it replaces the VF-11, which is what Project Supernova and Macross Plus is supposed to be about, but the cost of building the VF-19s and VF-21s, or VF-22s actually, was just so high that they needed something cheaper, and through Diamond Force using them very well with Macross 7, they became the next generation of mass-produced Valkyries. So that's a direct relation from 7 to F. Then in the Macross Frontier novelization, Emilia is a famous artist, a famous singer. So there is a mention of it. I wanted to make that point there. Then this is something that's directly related to Delta, where Windermere, in both the movie version and the first movie and the TV, they both use this as a reason for declaring war against the government, against the Shin Togogun, was that they're willing to ignore their own laws if it's for their benefit. This is proven in episode 43 of Macross 7, where they are willing to use the weapons of mass destruction against the Proto-Devlin because it suits their needs, not because of any other reason. Even though they're illegal weapons, they are willing to, they're willing to ignore their own laws. This is also shown again in Macross Frontier, both the movies and the TV series, where they're using the similar kind of weapons against the Bajira. So just keep that in mind. It's all about showing that the government is willing to, ignore everything just to do what they want and get what they want. Then I mentioned this a little bit earlier. In Macross 7, Max's comment that they've been thrown away by the government, and that's also in episode 43. In Macross Frontier and Delta, the battle groups are actually not directly controlled by the Earth government strictly. There are, like with Leon and Kathy and them in Frontier, and there are, like the Shin Togogun with the Macross Frontier battle group. It's that they're not in charge. They're kind of like a liaison protector group, kind of like SMS is. SMS does different things though. They do like special missions and stuff. But the point is that they're not directly in charge, and this is directly saying that Earth wants nothing to do with any of the immigration battle groups. They don't want anything to do with them. Once they leave, they're on their own. We don't care. Go do your own thing. That's basically what that is. Then in episode 44, Gamarin gives a ring to Mylene and says if they come if they make it back alive from Operation Stargazer, put it on your left ring finger, which means he wants to marry her, kind of thing. And also he says later, I forgot exactly what part in the episode, but it was a little bit later, he says like tell me your answer after we get back. This is basically what the second movie of Frontier pays an homage to with Duncan Aruto in that one particular scene, where she says, "Don't tell me your feelings, otherwise I won't be able to sing." There's a very similar scene in Macross 7, so that is actually an homage. Although the Frontier scene is kind of a mixed homage between the first Gundam, I think it's episode 23 or 24, one of the two. I think it's Ion Nagareru, but Minmei and Hikaru kiss, and then he goes off, and then she goes to sing, and then they bring an end to the war. And then you combine that scene with the background, you can see space and stuff, and you can see Earth in the background, and then you combine that with the Mylene scene, and you kind of put them together, and that's kind of the Aruto Danka scene from the second Frontier movie. So, I hope that this kind of gave you a good reason to watch Macross 7 because it's a much deeper series than people are willing to tell you about. They're not giving you spoilers. You need the spoilers to really understand this series and to have a reason to watch it because there's so many connections to everything that comes after it. And it's not just that Firebomber exists, okay? This series is extremely deep, and I've watched it. I took 3 days to watch it through this time. Even that was a chore. But it's worth a watch, and it will connect a lot of dots for people who haven't watched it, who kind of been avoiding it. And I'm not saying you have to like the series. I'm saying that you should watch it because it connects to everything else. Okay, it's very, very important that you know to understand the greatness of Macross is doing the deeper diving stuff with the protoculture stuff. But the beginning of where protoculture came from, their homeworld, how they evolved and how they developed technologically and things, and how they went on to create the Zentradi and how they went on to create the Proto-Devlin, which then explains into how they were able to create the Torinoshito from Macross Zero, and how they've been screwing around with genetic engineering for so long. And all of that back lore, all of that lore comes from episode 37. All of it. Every last one of it. So, in order to understand the protoculture side of it, you need to watch Macross 7. And then all of the rest of them that were released after Macross 7. So Zero, Frontier, and Delta. Everything will make a lot more sense. Okay? Much, 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 much more sense. Okay? So, it's, even if you don't like it, you should watch it all the way through, understand the protoculture lore, look for these little things like, the genus family picture and all this other stuff and how they connect to different things. How the, I didn't even talk about, Dynamite 7, did I? So let's go back in and quickly do Dynamite 7. Okay, Dynamite 7. It introduces the planet Zora, which is where Reina is from Macross Delta. And it's able to show that that songs can communicate to the space whales. People complain about the space whales. The problem is that without the space whales, we don't have the Bajra from Frontier. Everything that happens in Macross 7 Dynamite, or Dynamite 7, whichever one you call it, everything that happens with the space whales in Dynamite 7 is directly connected to how Nanka is able to communicate with the Bajra in Frontier. Although her situation has a little bit of extra detail there, but the fact that songs can be used to communicate with these creatures that are not human is extremely important. So people need to not bash Dynamite 7 for the space whales because it's a direct connection to things that come much later. Okay. So, that being said, now that I got through all that, as for, there's like the Macross 7 Plus little shorts. I recommend most of them. Some of them are just like silly, like Miria the President, which I like because that's Miria, but the earlier ones that take place earlier in the series actually give a lot of deeper background, like let's say Rei and Akiko's relationship, why Goblin became a pilot, and the kind of stuff he had to deal with Miria being his trainer and all this other stuff. So they're interesting. You don't have to watch them, but they are interesting. They do give some interesting backstory to a lot of characters. I recommend watching them, but you don't have to. That's not like a requirement. I think these are all the episodes I stated here: 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 23, 26, 27, 28. 29, 32, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 43, 44, 45, and then the last three are the key ones that will help you understand the series, and they actually are... They'll make you at least want you to watch it all the way through. So that's all for my review / why you should watch Macross 7. I didn't want to do it like everybody else. I wanted to actually give you specific reasons for why you should watch it, because I think without it and without watching it, you miss out on so much of the deep lore that takes place in Frontier and Delta that is kind of hidden in there because it's kind of separated kind of far away in time between was it 7 in Frontier, 7 in Delta. But there's a lot of important details in there that give a lot of important backstory, like protoculture and stuff, that are required to understand a lot of the details of the protoculture stuff from Frontier and Delta. So anyway, I hope this video is going to be helpful to some people, and I hope that it gets people to watch it, because I like Macross 7. I don't think it's the best series. I understand why people complain about it, but if you look at the deeper things that I've explained through this video, I think you'll probably enjoy it a little bit more. And I'm not afraid to tell people all these spoilers, because I want people to watch it and enjoy it. And I don't want people to complain about stupid, superficial things about it that really have no place in any argument against the series itself, in my opinion. So, anyway, that's all for this video.